May 11th, 2019, I had ready a report that could potentially have been a 20-year closeout report on what may have been shared technology concerning satellite technology negotiated between the United States and China. It was obstructed several times by every single person in the United States, usually to downgrade me for the railroad. My audit of the railroad is pending. I was never able to get that information either to China or to an appropriate safeguard, and everybody that obstructed it I consider to be engaged in acts of espionage domestically and a traitor. There was absolutely no reason why I couldn't have had a meaningful, legitimate relationship with China around technology development, including connected to satellite technologies and potentially even cell phone technologies. As a matter of fact, what I have seen from the American cellular network and cell phone development sector has been absolutely reprehensible. Starting with the Obama phone providers that hustle people on the street, usually right outside a pharmacy. On the contrary, what's been publicly presented from representatives of Chinese cell phone companies and Chinese network providers seems incredibly sensible. For the record, if there were to be a national mandate that internet technologies or network support companies were required to provide a certain percentage of stock shares in their companies to a specific element of the federal government in order to support a centralization of network security functions up to and including network maintenance, as well as assuring that there wasn't any hacking or manipulation of the bandwidth, and that within that there were particular requirements in terms of concepts of decorum or protocol that needed to be engaged related to content that was transmitted within certain network ranges. I would agree with that. As a matter of fact, I proposed a piece of legislation in 2017 regarding telecommunications. And one of the things it said specifically was that there should not be any network hopping without pre disclosure and without obtaining the informed consent, because people should be responsible for their access to networks that might share bandwidth, including with security features or with the federal government or even with the military. Recently, in this past summer, there was a change to legislation and a change to law regarding the ability to auction off certain frequencies through the FCC connected to bandwidth, including bandwidth that had previously been only accessible to the military. Just like in 1999, members of the United States military voiced their discontent and their concern with allowing civilian access to those networks without there being specific processes engaged. I don't think it's just because of the hardcore S&M pornography. I think it's because of the failure for anybody to respond appropriately in 1999. And rather than having a continuation of what appears to be an early relationship of at least mutual tolerance between Chinese national security establishment actors and American national security establishment actors, including people at high levels of technical and strategic development that had some recognition of what they were observing about the strategies from the people on the other side of the table, and even expressed appreciation, especially in the manners in which it was presented to people within the United States, as it was for many years. I think some of those people were very concerned about priorities that were allowed only to be discussed in closed door sessions of Congress right before a major terrorist attack on American soil. That, by the way, ended up liquidating resources from foreign countries that were in the United States and hence required to have insurance here. Just so you know, before you start getting into any more of your justifications for these continuing acts of slander, again, we are in the same position with China we were in 1999. Misrepresentations, including of who is actually under what authority to do what, and a refusal to listen to very sensible critique from people that are actually in national security roles, including military roles, about what other people are trying to pass off as their right to freedom of information, freedom of public expression, information, Internet of Things, the constitutional right we have to use pornography to manipulate people into relinquishing their rights to due process when they're being forced to engage acts of money laundering? Again, I would think that at some point somebody is going to actually be forthright and honest, because nobody seems to have grown up on that level since 1999. And we are coming up on what will be 21 years, going into the 22nd year since those arrangements were made. And the problem is, in the state of Texas, they have this law regarding perpetuities. And the understanding is that after a certain period of time, usually, traditionally, under common law at least, 20 years, the 21st year is a term during which you decide, are you going to maintain the status quo? Or have you reached the end and hence you're entitled to inherit? See, if we're in a situation where, as China already told us, we are on the verge of being recipients of a sort of refund on relationships we had with China for the last few years, as they had already told us and we were scheduled for in October of this year. But China had postponed it with an understanding that it's going to be coming up when now? What did we invest in or do with our relationship with China that we have to be concerned about having refunded? Just so you know, if I had been apprised in 1999 that I was supposed to be a special purpose vehicle for a president that intended to engage in acts of sexual extortion under the auspices of intelligence in order to sabotage his own country, I would not have agreed. But insofar as somebody else agreed to put me in that position without my consent, and now we're going through a different cycle, I contend now, as I would have then, that if there had been any integrity and there had been any honesty, and there had not been an intentional effort to slander who it is we're talking to, we could very well have had very meaningful, long-term, secure, and appropriate relationships. I have no more evidence right now than I did in 1999 that any of this was about anything errant on behalf of the nation of China. And I have all the evidence, including what you allowed to get stolen and resold to other people, to back up a counter argument if necessary. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Let's hope you guys exercise some decorum in the last few hours we have of this year, because I know what they're capable of. And I know what we should have been capable of, and unfortunately all the evidence is that those capabilities ended up with them.